The Minnesota starvation study was conducted by a researcher called Ansel Keys in 1944. This study taught us about the effects of starvation and the implications for people with eating disorders. Keys put 36 healthy men on a semi-starvation diet that caused them to lose in the region of 25% of their body weight. The researchers noticed that there were a number of interesting behavioural and psychological effects that coincided with the participants' weight loss. These effects included a dramatic preoccupation with food, weird eating behaviours such as pushing food around the plate, ritualised eating, and strange food concoctions, obsessions with cookbooks, food menus, and food preparation, and the men would spend hours planning what they were going to eat, and many of them would eat a large quantity of food when they were allowed to, and afterwards report feelings of depression and guilt. Overall, the men reported increased levels of depression, mood swings, and anxiety, as well as increased levels of anger, apathy, irritability with friends and family. Psychotic symptoms emerged in men who had previously never displayed them, as well as a lack of interest in sex and a loss of sense of humour. Many of the participants became withdrawn from social situations and experienced cognitive changes, such as being less able to concentrate, less alert, and having impaired judgment. Physical changes, including things like stomach discomfort, dizziness, headache, hair loss, visual disturbances. What we learned from the Minnesota starvation study is that many of the symptoms associated with eating disorders are actually symptoms of malnutrition or starvation. This is important as it tells us that in order to relieve such symptoms, the sufferer should be restored to a place of a healthy body weight first. Many people with eating disorders find that as they return to a normal body weight, the symptoms of malnutrition, as listed before, diminish. The problem is that the eating disorder makes a person anxious and scared of eating, so they need to be supported at mealtimes to ensure that they are on the path to wellness. Another thing that the Minnesota starvation study showed us is that in order for a person to adequately recover from starvation, they have to gain more than their pre-starvation body weight. Every man on the study, in the weight restoration phase of the experiment, gained more weight than he had before. The average was 10% more. The men all returned to their pre-starvation weight a while later. In respect to eating disorder recovery, this tells us that we should gain at least 10% more than our pre-eating disorder weight. Furthermore, we should not artificially restrict food and allow the body to continue at a higher weight until the body naturally returns to whatever weight is optimal for us. Many of the men in the Minnesota starvation study reported eating excessively in their recovery period. Many sufferers of eating disorders report binge eating when they are in recovery from an eating disorder. In eating disorder recovery, it is important that binges are not followed by periods of restriction, as restriction reinforces the eating disorder and can lead to periods of inadequate nutrition again. In summary, many of the symptoms associated with an eating disorder are actually symptoms of starvation. In order to relieve these symptoms, the sufferer has to eat and become weight restored. Due to the nature of eating disorders, support must be given at all stages of eating disorder recovery to ensure that the sufferer stays on track and is not overcome by the weight restoration anxiety that eating disorders create in the brain. A person with an eating disorder needs food and support in order to reach a full recovery. ADRA, putting the eating into eating disorder recovery.